So AMC is the largest movie theater company in the entire world, and as you guys might expect, during this global health crisis and the resulting pepperoni lockdowns, movie theaters have been forced to close down, and even those that are allowed to stay open are at very limited capacity, and that's resulted in them losing unbelievable amounts of money. And it's also resulted in the stock crashing, given the fear of AMC possibly going bankrupt if they're not able to turn things around soon. Well, after having secured additional funding to help them stay alive, at least for now, and given the fact that V-shots for the pepperoni are ramping up and rolling out, is now the perfect time to buy this turnaround story in AMC and ride that roller coaster back up. Well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's video, and as always, I'll let you guys know if I plan to buy this stock myself anytime soon. Should be a fun one. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hit the like button if you do. But let's go ahead and start by pulling up the stock chart and let's take a closer look at what's going on with AMC. Okay, now back in the day, this used to be over a $30 stock, but mostly since 2017, it began crashing down, with 2020 seemingly being the last nail in the coffin as it crashed all the way down to less than $2 a share. That's a decline of over 90%. Needless to say, investors lost a ton of money and nobody really seemed to be optimistic about where the company and the stock were headed. But fast forward to this year though, and the stock did actually make a surprise comeback as it quickly skyrocketed to over $20 a share before crashing back down to the $6 range, which is where it kind of sits today. Upper $6 range, maybe $7 range. But that's actually still technically over 200% higher than where it was at the start of this year. So nice little comeback there. That initial jolt though to about $20 a share that happened previously, that was mostly due to the Reddit phenomenon that we experienced recently, where a bunch of Redditors basically tried buying some of the most heavily shorted stocks in the market in an attempt to kind of fight back against hedge fund manipulation. But after brokerages started manipulating the market again by restricting the purchase of any new shares, the stock came crashing back down before rebounding a bit after the restrictions were finally lifted. We'll come back to this a little later, but first I want to talk about AMC's problems with their business that led to the stock being so low and so heavily shorted in the first place. As you may or may not know, AMC is currently the largest movie theater chain in the entire world with over 1,000 theaters and 11,000 screens. In the United States and Canada, the only companies that even come close in market share are Regal in second place and Cinemark in third place, which only owns about half the number of screens. And with features like Dolby, IMAX, and Prime, AMC is usually ranked as the most premium theater experience out there, so it's been difficult for anyone to really dethrone them, as people just simply prefer AMC over the competition, myself included. I especially love the premium sound and recliner seats of AMC, and to be honest, anytime I go to the movies, I always try to find an AMC theater, because I figure if I'm going to waste the time and money going out to a theater, which I actually do enjoy, I don't want to call it a waste, but if I'm going to do that, then I might as well pay a little extra and get the full premium experience that I'll really enjoy. So kudos to AMC for that. And of course, during normal times, that market dominance would be a great reason to actually own AMC stock. But as we all know, the past year has been anything but normal. And because of the global health crisis, movie theaters have been forced to close throughout the world, and especially here in the United States, where some have even closed their doors for good. Now, I couldn't find a lot of information on the overall market, but I did find this from, as of last September, IBizWorld estimated that 2020's movie theater market in the United States would see a crash in revenue of over 60%. That's a pretty big crash there. And it was probably a lot more than that, because in September, they were probably expecting things to actually start returning to normal in the fourth quarter, which we all know that never really happened. In fact, they actually estimated that the market would recover almost entirely in 2021, and yet here we are a couple months already into the new year, and we know that most movie theaters across the country are either still closed or at severely limited capacity. In fact, AMC stock actually jumped 20% today alone on the day of this recording. This is on like Monday night, but they jumped over 20%, and that was just because New York City is finally allowing theaters to open, but even there, it's only at 25% capacity. So I don't know how anyone expects a business to actually survive at just a quarter of their capacity. It's pretty crazy. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I don't want to get into like the politics of it all or whatever. I'm just saying that it's not good for AMC's business, but you can see how desperate people are that even at 25% capacity for just New York City, the stock actually shoots up over 20%. That's pretty crazy, you gotta admit. Now, digging a little deeper into AMC's financials, they haven't released their full year results for 2020 yet, but it's expected to be really bad. In fact, Yahoo Finance estimates that their revenue will have crashed by nearly 80%. That's their sales dropping by 80%. And that's already coming off of zero growth the year before. So that's really bad. And even though they do expect a nearly 140% recovery this year, it'll still leave them at about half the revenue that they typically see in a year. So you can only imagine the giant amounts of money that they must be losing in terms of profitability. Over the past year, they've already lost over $3.6 billion on their net income. In other words, they've basically lost over 3 times the amount of money that they brought in sales. That's insane. And especially when you consider that this is a company that doesn't usually bring in high profits to begin with. I think both 2017 and 2019 were actually both negative years for them. So, this isn't exactly a company that was performing really well even before the global health crisis. So with all of that negativity in mind, are there any positive indications that AMC could actually turn things around? And why are some traders and investors speculating that they can and actually buying the stock? And will I be buying this stock myself anytime soon also? Well, let's go ahead and cover that right now. Well, for starters, even after the bounce back from the bottom, the stock is still down about 80% from their highs. So if the company was truly able to turn things around, then that would actually leave plenty of upside potential for the stock to heavily reward investors. And that's really the bullish case here. Give it enough time and people should return to theaters, which should help the company recover. About a week ago, Fauci said that anyone who wants a V-shot for the pepperoni will be able to get one by the end of April, which would be huge, positive news for AMC. However, just a few days later, he did push that timeline back to either June, July, or even August, with President Biden echoing the same thing in a recent interview where he mentioned that there would be enough doses by the end of July, but not that everyone would actually have access to them. In other words, it's difficult to predict exactly when the V-shots will be available to everyone, but hopefully we're talking about at least sometime in summer going into the fall. But that's still almost half a year more that AMC has to wait. And if that's the case, then the company would have likely gone bankrupt unless they raised money, which is actually exactly what they've done. Around the start of this year, they noted that they needed around $750 million to prevent bankruptcy this year. And so they ended up raising close to $1 billion to even give them some extra wiggle room, but it didn't stop there. Thanks to the rise in the stock price from the Reddit frenzy, AMC was able to take advantage of the climb and sell some new shares to raise another $300 million. In other words, bankruptcy this year is almost certainly not going to happen. However, I would normally praise the issuance of new stock when the price surges to unrealistic levels to kind of capitalize on that, but AMC ended up selling that new stock for less than $5 a share, and if they had just waited one more day, they could have actually raised over $1 billion with the same amount of shares because the stock had climbed to almost $20. And even today, the stock is still quite a bit higher than where they sold it at. I don't necessarily blame them for that because it's impossible to really time the market, but I don't believe that they sold any more shares after that initial sell, which I think was a huge mistake since the stock did eventually come crashing back down. So that I do actually blame them a little bit for. Either way though, this now makes it possible for the company to survive long enough to make it through the year and wait for the V-shots to hopefully convince people to return to movie theaters. As of right now, AMC claims to have most of their movie theaters open, but for example, California is one of their biggest markets and literally every single theater in that state is still closed, and even the ones that are open in other states are at limited capacity of around 40% or even less, which means significantly less revenue from not just ticket sales, but also concession sales like snacks and drinks where they actually make the most of their profit. Not to mention that some local or state mandates even require people to wear masks at literally all times, which means they legally cannot even sell food or drinks in those areas because you would have to remove it to actually eat or drink. So they're legally not even allowed to sell those things. And then you throw on top of it all that many people in general are still just too afraid to even go out without a V-shot. And it's just hard to imagine that AMC will be having a big comeback, at least not anytime soon, in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, the stock is still dirt cheap right now with a market cap of less than $2 billion and a PS ratio of just about 0.2, which has led to speculation that some giant behemoth like Amazon might even be interested in buying them out entirely. But because of all their massive debt, their enterprise value is actually closer to $13 billion, which is dramatically more expensive. And even if we put all the negatives from the global health issue aside, movie theaters were already struggling to grow because of the rise of streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Video, and later Disney Plus, or even like HBO Max, that are not only convincing people to watch more movies from home, but some of these platforms are actually owned by the gigantic blockbuster studio companies that movie theaters actually rely on. In fact, Disney, AT&T, and Universal alone control over half of the entire market, and all three of them have robust streaming platforms in Disney Plus, HBO Max, and Peacock, all of which have either partially or even fully committed to releasing their blockbuster movies on their streaming platforms at the same time of their theatrical release, which isn't very good news for movie theater companies like AMC. So for me, when I look at AMC and I try to determine whether this is a stock that I want to buy as a long-term investment, gotta be honest, I'm just really not that excited. Look, don't get me wrong, I don't think movie theaters are ever going to go away because the experience is really cool, and I personally love movie theaters, so nobody wants things to go back to normal as much as I do. I want to go to movie theaters and I want to have a normal experience there, and I absolutely love them, so I don't want to see them go away, and I don't think they will go away, but I don't think that there's a lot of growth or even profitability in that market. So for me as a long-term investment, I just think there's safer plays out there that I wouldn't have to be constantly monitoring and be seeing it take huge swings to the upside, to the downside, and things like that. So I don't see it as much as a solid long-term investment, as much as I see it as more of like a short-term kind of gamble or speculative play, or even like a swing trading play. And I'm not that kind of investor, so those things don't really appeal to me. So AMC, I'll be sitting this one out. But if you want my opinion on what could kind of drive this stock in the short term, well, again, I think this is going to remain a super volatile stock. Don't be surprised one day you see it up a huge amount, another day you see it down a huge amount. But if you ask me for what are the things that could really drive it in a positive way, well, I think there's three primary things. One would be, of course, if a giant company like Amazon buys them out, I think that would probably help the stock a lot. Number two would be if Redditors return to AMC and pump up the stock again. Obviously, that would drive it up a huge amount, and that could really help. And then number three would be if there really is a huge amount of pent-up demand, which I actually do think there is, and things get back to normal soon, and V-shots come out for the pepperoni and really ramp up, and they're able to operate at higher capacities again, then there could actually be a surge in demand for movie theaters, and AMC could see a pop from that. But again, a lot of these things have to do with speculation and kind of short-term movements. These aren't really long-term fundamental aspects of the business where I don't see a lot of growth and I don't see a lot of profitability. So for me, as more of a long-term investor, I'd rather stick to something else. And even as a, once in a while, I do like to make speculative kind of short-term plays. But I think there's safer ones out there, at least ones that maybe won't be as volatile, that I won't have to, have a headache and be constantly monitoring as much as I probably would with AMC. So it's not a horrible one, it's not like a really bad one or anything like that. It does have some promise, but it is also still very risky, and I think it's going to be very volatile. So anyway, those are just my opinions. I'm sitting this one out, but let me know what you guys have to say down below. Do you own AMC stock? Are you thinking about owning it or anything else? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and I'll try to respond to as many comments as I can. Thanks again for watching, guys. More videos are coming. Please hang in there. I know I haven't been uploading a lot, but I promise that's going to get better. I'm building out a studio somewhere else, and there's just a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes. But later on into the year, this is going to be a huge boost for the channel. We're going to be uploading way more frequently, much more consistently, and it's going to be a lot of fun. I promise you guys, please just hang in there. But anyway, thanks again, guys. Hit the like button if you enjoyed the video. Hope you're all doing well out there. Stay safe and with everything, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.